Okay, so again, welcome everyone. My name is Heike Ritter and I will be your host for this webinar. Thanks for joining and thanks for being part of our community. A few reminders before we get started. All of these webinars will be recorded and shared publicly afterwards on our community at aka.ms/security-webinars. During the webinar, please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the live event Q&A window by clicking on Ask a Question. Questions you post might be made publicly visible, and if you prefer, you can post your question anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter it. We often get many questions here, and we are doing our best to respond to all of them in real time. If the answer was not provided, if you have additional questions afterwards, or if you are actually listening to this after the fact as a recording, please don't hesitate to ask them on the Microsoft 365 Defender forum at aka.ms/M365D Please also join that community, because that's always the best way for you to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. In our community, you can speak directly to the engineering teams that are building our product, so please join us. We also would love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars, so please do so at the end at aka.ms/security-webinar-feedback. This is important so we can deliver the content that you need. So today's episode of our monthly threat insights will focus on the defense evasion technique HTML smuggling, and I'm handing over to you, Bobish.
Yeah, thank you, Heike, for the intro. So hello, everyone. Good morning and good evening. Hope everyone is safe and healthy. First of all, thanks for joining the webinar. Myself, Bhubeshwaran, part of Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence team, and it's been 1.5 years working with this team. And I have my team member, Aishwarya, also with me. Hello, Aishwarya.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aishwarya here.
So today we are going to share our insights on our recent research work tracking an HTML smuggling campaigns. So let's try to dive into the topic. So in general, phishing emails are constantly used by the attackers as there is they see increasing success rate. So, and how do the attackers achieve those success rate is by constantly changing the strategies to evade from defensive controls, which makes us as a defender also being challenging to detect those techniques. And one of those strategies that we have found during our research is leveraging HTML smuggling technique to deliver the malicious payload into the victim device. Basically, this is not a novel technique, but still recently we observed that there is a significant rise that different campaigns uses this HTML smuggling techniques. And hence we have alerted our community by tweeting it in our Microsoft Security Intelligence portal. If you are not following it, please do follow and get the latest threats and updates and techniques on that. Back to here, like this technique uses the combination of HTML5 and JavaScript features to bypass the defensive controls like our email scanners, firewalls, proxies, and even sandboxes. And how the attackers able to achieve this is by generating an malicious HTML code within the browser of the victim device because it's already inside the perimeter of the targeted ARG. Also, there are different ways to code the HTML smuggling virtually. So it's always been a challenge to us to detect or to write a detection to all of these variants. And many of these techniques also use legitimate websites as well. Anyway, we'll see more about this technique in coming slides with examples. So next is like when we see from attacker's perspective, attacker standpoint, a web browser are always one of the ideal environment to stage an attack, especially at this pandemic times, because most of the employees are working remotely and they spend much of their time in accessing cloud-based applications through web browsers. So cyber criminals takes advantage of this situation and target this remote-based workforce. And even recently, we have seen a threat actor named Nobilium, who has been behind the SolarWinds supply chain attack. They have launched a series of spear phishing campaigns early this year by leveraging this HTML smuggling technique. In those campaigns, actually, they have used a JavaScript to write an ISO file onto the disk, which has a Cobalt Strike beacon DLL in it, and it has been triggered by an LNK file. So maybe if you are more interested in that, you can go to the reference here to read the blog. And today we are going to deep dive on two different campaigns that delivers a banking or info stealing trojans named Mekotio and Osaben. These are actually a tracked threats, and we track these threats under different groups, Dev 0238 and Dev 0253. So along with that, we'll also share about how do we mitigate or how do we detect or hunt for these specific threats. So HTML technique, this been always increased the worries among the enterprise as well as for us as a defenders. So let's take some time to understand what more about this technique. The general idea behind this HTML smuggling technique is to include a link to a file in a normal email. It's like an usual phishing email, but during scanning, it doesn't look malicious because it does not, it is not actually malicious by itself. Also, it does not direct point to any file type that our email scanners or even sandboxes consider or suspect as malicious, like exe or an MSI file extensions. Also, the malware is not generated by the URL, but it is generated by the JavaScript, which is highly obfuscated here. As I said, it uses the combination of HTML and JavaScript features. So, so let's understand what all those features that it is picking up. So in HTML5, they introduced a feature called href and download attributes for anchor tags, which is now supported by all the modern browsers. When a user clicks on any hyperlink, the download attribute instructs the browser to download the target pointed by the href attribute and save it to the disk. But on the other hand, this anchor tags and its download attribute href can also be created by JavaScript instead of HTML file so that they can obfuscate it more. The next one is on the JavaScript feature called blobs. Basically, the blob is binary large objects that represents raw data, the actual data. The important thing to understand is when the JavaScript downloads the data that is stored in these blobs and installed on the victim device, this blob allows to construct the file objects locally into the victim machine. Instead of directly the web server that is being directly providing as the complete file, it constructs the file into the browser of a victim machine. So by combining these two features of HTML attributes, href and download attributes, along with this JavaScript code to assemble the malicious file inside the browser. So these are like two different features that it used to achieve it to be more successful. So on next, let's deep dive into the campaigns and their attack chains. And for that, I would like to welcome Aishwarya, who is one of the primary researchers uncover these attacks campaigns. Welcome, Aishwarya.
Yeah, thank you, Bhupesh. Thank you so much. So Bhupesh has really explained very well about how HTML smuggling actually works. So in coming slides, we will see with examples how HTML smuggling pages actually look and how they are leveraged by the attackers to fulfill their malicious intent. So as mentioned previously, we are going to talk about two banking Trojan campaigns. One is Mekotio and one is Osabane. So basically these two campaigns are under the category of Latin American banking Trojans. So these Microsoft has started tracking these. There are multiple campaigns associated under it, various malwares which are there under that Latin American banking Trojan group. So today we are going to discuss two out of them. The basic agenda or the basic idea behind categorizing this group is these attackers are most specific towards the Latin American speaking region, and they basically target those regions like Mexico, Brazil, Portugal, and such kind of regions. So that has been their main geolocation for attack, but by time we are seeing in our telemetry that it's expanding towards the European regions and trying to be widespread. So in this first campaign, in the month of June, we had seen a big spike of an spear phishing email, which was like mentioning about like CNPJ, which is like a tax number which is there in that Latin American region, mentioning that it is being suspended and they need to perform some actions at their end. So this is actually Portuguese language, and which gives us an idea. Okay, yes, those are the region, Latin American region, which usually utilizes this language, and their basic geolocation or to be targeted is those regions. So in the snippet, if you see, there is a hyperlink highlighted with a var, and that is the link which is responsible for performing the next stage malicious activities and leading us to the HTML smuggling page. And the impact wise, we'll discuss in coming slides how impactful and how they are expanding in the other geolocations. Now let's start with the attack chain. Question wise, I would request everyone to keep it till the end themselves, or they can post it on the chat, and my peer members or I would address them as and when possible. So from the attack chain angle, as mentioned, as we saw in the previous slide, the snippet contains an hyperlink which is responsible when the layman user clicks on the link, he is redirected to one particular URL, and that particular URL is responsible for generating the HTML smuggling page on the browser at the runtime and downloading a malicious file. And this malicious file is actually a zip file containing JavaScript. So this JavaScript behaves as a downloader. Its basic malicious intent is to download the next stage payload, but this JavaScript is completely obfuscated and very difficult for a layman's eye to understand what exactly that script is doing. After this JavaScript further downloads the next stage payloads, which is again a zip file containing DLLs and executables. So this is actually an entire installer module of an well-known free software of Daemon Tool Pro, which is actually an emulating tool which is responsible for taking disk images, and that's the reason that we are seeing the activity of DLL side loading. The actual the DLL, like there are like 3 to 4 modules which are being downloaded in the zip file, and out of that, one of the DLL is manipulated. It contains the original content plus the malicious content, and the combination of that is being loaded with DLL side loading when the exe of the daemon tool is executed. So that the exe executes properly and even the malicious intent of the file is fulfilled. Next, what is the malicious intent of this DLL file when it is side loaded? So basically, as we mentioned, these are banking trojans. So they are responsible for stealing the banking information, credential, stealing from the browsers, key logging, and followed with that, they are also trying to collect informations about whether the machine has admin privileges, whether it has any specific antivirus software being installed on it, and also trying to get the information about the firewall on the systems. So this is how the attack kill chain looks. And if we check here, as Bhupesh has already explained about how HTML smuggling looks like, but let's see an example like how exactly the page looks and what exactly the as href or the blob or how does it exactly look like. So when we saw the snippet of the email, when we click on that word which was highlighted, it redirects to this website, which is like pocardi.net directorio, which further is responsible to implement the HTML smuggling technique. So it renders an HTML smuggling page which has like 2 modules in it. One is the HTML file download attribute, which has an href, which refers to the URL from where the payload needs to be downloaded. So this is one of the technique using href, and the second one is using the blob, JavaScript blobs. So in the blob, in order to make sure that they evade detection techniques, in the blob, they are keeping the raw execute file, that is the JavaScript file, in the base64 encoded format. And at runtime, it is decoded and passed to the JavaScript API to execute the script at runtime. So when I, as a layman, would click on the link, I would just see an zip file being downloaded. I would really not see the page which is doing HTML smuggling or anything at the back end. I would just see a file being downloaded at my end. And as the email specifies that your CNPJ is suspended, so accordingly the user would expect that yes, definitely there is something which needs to be downloaded and opened. So that is how they would try to fulfill their malicious intent. And this is the snippet of the HTML smuggling page and example. As mentioned at the top, it's the base64 encoded blob, which is actually a JavaScript file in compressed in a zip format and kept. So at runtime, we see the API of base64 to array buffer. So it would be decoded at runtime and saved in with the file name cbqmn292 underscore a big name dot zip. So that is where actually the zip file is being kept so that the user would execute it. And followed with that, this is one of the way of JavaScript blob. And the second one is, as mentioned, the href. So at the href link, you would see the location from where it's the same JavaScript or the zip file which is downloaded from the top, which we are seeing at the top, but it is downloaded from this URL and stored at this file name location. So the file name in both the cases is the same. So this is how, in either way, it is trying to fulfill its the way of evading the detection techniques. So if you, as we saw in the snippet, the textual is really clean enough for a detection engine to catch signature wise. So that's the reason they are trying to evade. So it's, and if at all any obfuscations or any further level of encoding is added, then that makes the detection really difficult for the engine to identify it. Now that we know that the JavaScript is onto the machine, what does the JavaScript do? The zip file has a JavaScript which would further again connect to a malicious link of malparq.org, and it downloads some file with the name of .png extension. But it is not a PNG file. It is actually a zip file that is masqueraded as an PNG file. Now, what does this zip file contain? As mentioned previously in the attack kill chain, this zip file has 3 modules, 2 DLLs and 1 random named exe. So these are the supporting exes which are needed by the legitimate file named DiskSoft Bus Service Pro. And these DLLs are needed for proper execution of these Daemon Tool Pro tools. But the SPDT in f.dll is a legitimate file, and it is needed for the exe to be executed properly. But the next DLL which is there, img engine.dll, this DLL is actually a Themeda packed or VM protected for obfuscation. And this DLL is combination of the original content plus the malicious content. So with the help of DLL side loading, this DLL is executed, and the next stage activities of maintaining the remote access, credential stealing, key logging, collecting the banking information, all such activities are performed. As Bhubesh already mentioned, we track this group as dev238 internally, and Mekotio is, we have seen it targeting specifically Windows systems. So it is more targeting specific for Windows operating systems, and it is seen to target Spanish banks. But as we go ahead in the coming slides, we would see that it's trying to impact various other regions in the geolocations. And the most important factor here is it is trying to monitor the browser behavior, and based on the browser, if at all there is any banking site being visited, they try to pop up a fake banking page, and when so the user would feel like, okay, it has gone to the original banking page, they would enter their credentials, login information, whatever is needed, and that is actually stolen by this Mekotio banking Trojan malware. And here in this slide, you would see the snippet of the actual JavaScript file. So as I mentioned, this JavaScript is extremely obfuscated. Looking at this, we really cannot understand what is its intent. So this proves that attackers are really trying to evade the detections and the detection techniques and make sure that they stay persistent on the impacted organizations. Next, yeah, impact wise, if we see Mexico, Brazilian region and the South American region, most of the Latin American spoken region are completely affected with this campaign. Followed with the next, the European region is coming up, which is again getting impacted. So the attack mechanism or the delivery mechanism may change as the geolocation is being changing, but this is how the scenario is going forward, that they are trying to improve themselves and expand in the various geolocations. So hope this first campaign was helpful, Bhupesh.
Yeah, thanks, Aishwarya. It provided like a clear understanding about the HTML smuggling technique, like with this example. So everyone in the call also got an idea about it. And we have also tracked one more campaign leveraging the same technique to deliver Osaban, which is again a Latin American Trojan. So can you quickly share the infection chain of that Osaban campaign and how it is different from Mekotio's infection chain?
Sure, definitely. I will go to campaign 2 now. Yes. So this campaign is again under the category of the Latin American banking Trojans, but this has some similarities with the previous campaigns, but also there are some differences based on the file extensions that are there and followed with the malicious intent of that file, which is dropped. So in this case, again, it's a email which is responsible for the initial access into the organization. And in this email, in this case, we are seeing Azure hosted website being responsible for doing HTML smuggling activities. So this again proves that attackers are really trying to move to the cloud side and make sure they have their infrastructure on the cloud and maintained at their end. So that is again a side of an evolvement which we have seen. Followed with that, the HTML smuggling, once the URL is being clicked, the HTML smuggling technique again would be the same as, or the HTML smuggling page would be same as we saw in the previous example, only the file or the payload which is downloaded via this behavior would change. In this case, we are seeing a zip file containing an MSI file. So an installer file, which is responsible to behave as a downloader. In the previous case, it was actually a JavaScript. Now it's an MSI file. Inside this MSI file, there is a JavaScript file, the resource section, which is responsible for performing the downloading behavior and the malicious side of the activity of this family. So this JavaScript file or the MSI file again connects to an malicious site, and along with that, it also makes sure that it's persistent using the run registry entry. And after connecting to the malicious site, in this case, we have seen it downloading Avira AV executables, which is again a legitimate free software which is available. But again, like we have seen in Daemon tool, one of the DLL is manipulated with the malicious content, and that DLL is executed via DLL side loading, since the DLL is kept in the same folder as the executable. And at the next stage, it would be responsible for doing credential theft and key logging. But along with that, in this, we have seen this family utilizing Windows document file, which is actually considered as a configuration file, which contains information about the servers, C2 server to be connected, various commands that are needed to be performed, or configuration information. So that is kept in an encoded format in the document file, and at the runtime that is decoded and the activities are performed. Again, the banking Trojan activity here is performed with the fake banking pages, and using that credentials and the banking information are stolen. So this actually is one of an interesting campaign because, again, as we saw, the MSI file has an embedded JavaScript, but here again, the behavior of masquerading is being done. Although the extension of the file is .css, but it downloads another zip file. It's not a .css file, but it's a zip file containing legitimate Avira antivirus AV executable file and configuration DLLs, along with malicious payload. As I mentioned, the DLL is manipulated. Avira OE native core.dll. So this is an unsigned DLL which is responsible. And few of the factors of this DLL is, it is like the size of this DLL is 400 MB. That is because it has the null bytes padded in it. And these null bytes are actually padded to make sure that they break the sandboxy analysis, or it is an evasion technique of detections, because it really becomes difficult to parse such a large file, and that too with the null bytes. So that is one of the factors which we have seen on this DLL. And as I mentioned, it is executing via DLL side loading. Yes, and the malicious behavior of this DLL. So this DLL is actually the O7 payload which is downloaded. So this DLL makes sure that the remote access tool maintains its routine and has its persistence on the machine, gets the credentials, stealing information, and as I mentioned in the kill chain, steal the banking information. We track this group as Dev253, also known as OSAPIN, as Bhupesh has already mentioned in the overview slides. And this family is actually responsible for targeting financial and banking organizations, specifically located in Brazil and Mexico. And this behavior has been seen from like 2017, but it is still happening, and they are evolving with the techniques. They are making sure that various types of files are utilized as downloaders. They are trying to obfuscate itself and maintain its persistence in the organization. Impact wise, if you see, it's almost the same as campaign one, because it together lies under one category of Latin American banking Trojans. So yes, if you see Mexico, South America, Brazil, these regions again are totally impacted, and Europe being the next stage, which is impacted with this attack. So this is how we have some information about campaign 2, and I would definitely look into the questions that are there in the chat and respond back as an when possible. So hope Bhupesh this helps, and Bhupesh will guide us with the next stages of how we can mitigate this attack and how you can leverage M365 portal to mitigate these behaviors. Over to you, Bhupesh.
Yeah, thank you, Aishwarya. And yes, we have almost covered the two different campaigns, how they leverage the HTML smuggling technique. So now it's time to see how do our Microsoft Defender protects our customer against this technique, and what would be our mitigation suggestions to our customers and even everyone in the call. So our first suggestion is to prevent JavaScripts from executing automatically. Maybe since we have a lot of actionable intelligence here, let me quickly go through our M365D Center to show how do we take action on this. Also, it would be a quick intro for the ones who have not experienced Microsoft Portal yet. So let me quickly jump there. Sorry. So this is our M365D Center, and onto the left, you could see there are lots of features that are available. You can explore these features, and but for now, today we are going to focus on the threat analytics section. So this is the home page. So when you click on threat analytics section, so you go here. So here you could see the threat analytic articles that we have published whenever we find any new threat or an emerging threat or any new findings that would impact our customers. So onto the top, you could see the tags that are associated with these articles like ransomware or phishing, or it's related to any vulnerability, or it is any threat actor group that is being targeting. So all those tags has been added. And next to that, you could see the latest threat articles that we have published here. Also, you could see the impact on these threats to your organization. So if it is red, it is an active alert, and if it is green, it is a resolved alert. Here you won't see much alert since it's a demo account created for this webinar, so you won't don't expect like much alerts here. And next section is the high impact threats. So this is highly specific to your organization. So which is the threat that is highly targeting your organization, or which has high impact in your organization. So you could see, for example, AdvinRat, it has almost 18 incidents, out of which two are active and 16 are resolved. So it's now a SOC analyst can look into these two active alerts and investigate on that. So this is the primary sections that we have here. So let's now go into the article itself. So this is our HTML smuggling article that we have published. So let us go here. So this is first, it gives an overview about the article, either about the campaign or about the technique and everything. And when you come down, so you could see what are the incidents that is related to this threat on your organization with severity scores, like whether it is a very high or medium or a low. And this section, you would be able to see alerts over the timeline when it has happened and whether it is active or resolved and stuff. And the next section here, you could see the secure configuration status and vulnerability patches. So this is one more section that you want to focus. So you can click on view mitigation details. So this would take you to what all devices that is being misconfigured or it is vulnerable. So specific to this threat, not like everything. So for this specific threat, we have like few mitigations that we will will see out. So for example, we have this mitigation in our plate, turn on real-time protection, and you could see there is one device that is still doesn't have this real-time protection turn on. So you can just quickly click here and go take action on those specific device. And similarly, there is 12 devices that has switched off the Defender application guard. So you can just click here to get it to quick action. So this is how this management works. And when it comes to vulnerability, if any vulnerability is being mapped to the specific threat, then you could see all those vulnerable devices in your environment because it's been interlinked with your TVM, means the vulnerability management, threat vulnerability management section. So you will be able to see all those vulnerable devices here itself. So let's jump back to the report. So this is an overview. Let's go into Analyst Report. So in Analyst Report, you could see the executive summary and then the analysis section where it talks about the campaign 1 and its attack chain and the code snippets of how it looks. And this is the Java investigator code. Like these are like what Aishwarya was explaining till now about both the campaigns. This is campaign 2 and its kill chain. And these are the impacted areas for campaign 1, and this is for campaign 2. So these all we have seen already. So let's quickly jump into the mitigations. So here, our first mitigation, as I said, it's to prevent the JavaScript from executing automatically. So how do we do that? Is by pushing a group policy that .js or JSC files it should be associated or opened with a notepad instead of running as a script. So whenever someone intentionally or even unintentionally opens a file with .js or JSE extension, so it will open in a notepad rather executing that script. So this is our first recommendation. And the next one is make sure your firewall and proxies are in place, properly configured, so that there aren't any new malware payloads that are downloaded in sequential stages. Also, it would prevent any kind of C2 communication. And the next one is we encourage to use Microsoft Edge, if not at least the web browser that supports Smart Screen, because as and when we see any new domains or compromised sites that delivers malicious payloads or it's involved in phishing, we will be adding a detection to that then and there, so that you will get an up-to-date protection. The next one is to turn on the cloud delivery protection and to keep our defenders up to date. And the next one is to configure the email filters to block all the spam and spoofed emails. And we recommend to use Microsoft Defender for O365 to get more additional protection, especially to defend against this polymorphic threats variants like this MITREATT and stuff. And the last one is like turning on the attack surface reduction rules. So these are like we call it as ASR rules. So these are basically a generic rules that would be creating a block the common techniques that is being used by the threats. So like in this case, we would be able to block the JavaScript that is being running from an executable content, and we have other ASA rules as well. So if you want to look at all other, there are this is very few, and these ASR rules are specific to this threat. But if you want to look at all the recommendations, security recommendations that for your organization, then go here, click on vulnerability management, go to recommendations. So here you will be able to see all the recommendations based on your security configurations or devices that you have in your environment. So you could see these all few ASR rules, security controls. You have to enable this in your security controls. And there are a few other vulnerable applications running. It could not only Windows or any other applications with vulnerability that has been running. And you can see how many devices are being exposed and how many are remediated, and what should be the remediation as well. What is the remediation type? Either a configuration change or software uninstall or update, or a new software has to be installed there. So we gave all the recommendations also here, so you could use this to remediate there. So that's it here. So let's jump back to the report. So after that, we have detection details. So here we have added detection to all the recent samples that we have got. So these are all the detection signatures. So if you are using a Defender, then you don't need to worry about it. If not, you can use the indicators that we have to block in your own antivirus or EDR engines. And here, this is since we have like a kind of new gen capabilities like machine learning and behavioral detection in AV. These are few signatures that would be triggered because of this behavioral and ML detections. And at the EDR side, it is the alert name would be Mekotio banking Trojan malware. So whenever EDR gets the behavior of this Mekotio, then it would trigger with this name. You can take a look at it. And the next section would be more interesting to threat hunters. Like I hope there would be more threat hunters also in this call. So apart from these alerts, if you want to proactively look into or hunt for these threats in your own telemetry, then you can use these AHQs, advanced hunting queries, to hunt in your environment. So the first query is targeting the second campaign, means the delivery of O7 campaign. So where Aishwarya has explained. So basically it downloads a .css extension file, but basically it's a zip file from an MSA execution. So this is what the query. So we have used a regex to name that file, and the parent execution should be MSX execution. So you can just directly click on here, run this query. So it would direct to the page where you will run the advanced hunting queries in general. So you can just click on run query and the results will be loaded down. So as I said, this is a demo portal, so you won't expect any alerts here, but still you can check in your environment whether you have any alerts specific to this or not. Yeah, we have no results here. So there is one more query we have added to check the detection, means AV detections on Mekotio and Osaban. This would be also be a point to investigate further. So the next section is on indicators. So these are the file indicators and domains that we have got during our researching on this campaign. So basically these indicators are been already added detections on AV and smart screen and all other controls. So if you're not using a Microsoft product, please do leverage these indicators and block in your security controls. So next section is MITREATT attack mapping. So based on these attack chain, we have mapped MITREATT framework here. Especially you could see the authenticated files. This shows that the JavaScript, which is highly authenticated. And the next one, like DLL side loading, this technique is being used by both the campaigns of Mekotio and Osaban. And the next one is like JavaScript interpreter. Again, it leads to a JavaScript that downloads the zip files. And the final is the exfiltration of stealing the credentials, especially the banking data from the user. And these are all the few references to that. So I hope like we covered what all we have expected. So let's quickly jump back to the slides. If we have missed any, we can just touch up there. So yeah, these are the mitigations we have seen. So the direct, as we have seen in the portal, so if you have subscription to M365D, then you can directly action from the portal itself. So if not, you can use these mitigation suggestions and implement in your respective security controls to protect yourself from these two threats. And these all ASR recommendations is the same, and these all the detection signatures we already seen. And even for advanced hunting queries, if you're not using AHQs here, you can convert this query into your own product queries, any kind of product that you use as SIM, and then you can hunt for these threats, but the logic remains the same. And the indicators, you can you leverage this, and this is the MITREATT framework mapping. That's it. So for those who have access to M365D portal, anyway, you will have access to the threat analytics report that we have seen and all of the indicators. And those who don't have access to M365D, no worries. Still, this presentation will be made public, so you can go through as and when required and access the indicators or AHQs whenever you need. That's it from my end. Again, thanks everyone for attending the webinar. Over to you, Heike.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya and Bobish, for another great monthly Threat Insights webinar. So I posted a few links as well in our question and answer announcements window. So I will repeat those for you here as well. So recording and slides will be made available at aka.ms/security webinars. Our next scheduled webinar in the Microsoft 365 Defender area is about Microsoft Defender for Identity and its latest detection capabilities on October the 6th. And you can register as well on aka.ms/security webinars. If you scroll down the page, you will find the link. If we missed, we got so many questions. Thanks everyone for being so curious and engaging. If we missed to answer your questions, or if you have additional questions, so please go to our Microsoft 365 Defender forum at aka.ms/M365DTC. And again, thank you, Aishwarya and Bobish, for today's webinar. Thank you to the rest of the team who helped answering the questions. And of course, most of all, I want to thank you all for being part of our community, for joining us on those webinars, keeping them interactive. And yeah, we hope that we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you and bye-bye.